In a world filled with screens and distractions, we invite you to reconnect with the natural world around you. Welcome to Nature Bound, a podcast dedicated to unpacking the intrinsic bond between humans and nature. We'll uncover the benefits of spending time outdoors, including how a nature-centric lifestyle can improve your mental health, elevate your leadership skills, and unleash your creativity. And now here's your host, outdoor enthusiast, and renowned author of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, Emanuel Rose.
I am Emanuel Rose, and this is the Nature Bound podcast. I have the pleasure today to talk about turkey hunting 101 or turkey hunting basics with Jim Clark, and I'm really excited about that. And Jim, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Emanuel. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. And so my name is Jim Clark, and I currently live in Portland, Oregon, although I grew up in Chicago. And after getting my undergrad degree and my graduate degree in business, I decided to pursue an entire career in the active outdoor industry, which is to say I've always been a hunting, fishing, camping, boating enthusiast. And so for 22 years of my career, I had made various leadership roles in the companies in the outdoors, and it was a great run, and had a chance to do a lot of hunting and fishing over the years, but have a particular love for turkey hunting. And I believe that's why we're talking today. I'm excited to talk Turkey Hunting 101 for sure. It's right around the corner.
Well, I appreciate that you're willing to help me out on this, because I'm still a beginner. I think I'm in this will be my third season, and I've moved to like the desert of turkey hunting. Essentially, the state of Nevada has got like a total of 20 tags or something, right? So they're still trapping and introducing turkeys to some very specific parts of Nevada, and most of which are on private property. So I've kind of written that off and said, well, about an hour and 10 minutes for me is some forest land, that a lot of national forest, and so I need to figure out a game plan for how I'm going to track down turkey terroir and then get into some spots for early season turkey hunt. So just tell me again how many years you've been turkey hunting.
Well, I haven't really added it up, Emmanuel, but I will say this. I'll give you some dates. I actually started turkey hunting when I was in grad school in Southern Illinois. So that would have been 1986. And the reason it was later in my life, it was in grad school years, in my early 20s, is because in Illinois, and at that time in the United States, the turkey population was quite a bit less than it is now. And so there was actually a draw, and you had to apply, and there was a first, second, and third season. And I was in college, and it was, conflicting with class schedules and so on. And I finally decided to take the plunge and do it. I didn't know anything about it, but I had a wingman buddy in college who wanted to learn with me. So we applied and received a third season tag, which was in May. And that's when we started. And again, back at that time in the 80s and early 90s, there was a lot fewer turkeys in the United States. Thanks to the great work of the National Wild Turkey Federation and chapters across the country, the turkey population is significantly bigger today. And we enjoy a lot greater, more, I would say, broader seasons and opportunities than we had back then. But so we're talking 35 years-ish.
All right, so 35 years, but then there's also 2 seasons per year. So you've had probably 60 seasons of turkey hunting.
Well, actually, no. And the reason is because I don't hunt turkeys in the fall.
Oh, all right.
I hunt turkeys in multiple states in the spring. and I loved a springtime hunt. The fall is different style of hunting. They're not during the mating season, and so it's a style of hunting that I'm not as enthusiastic about. However, I also have other interests in the fall: duck hunting, deer hunting, and steelhead fishing. So
Right.
you can pick and choose when you love to do it all, like you and I do. So spring turkey hunt, I don't fall turkey hunt, but there are great opportunities to do so in the fall.
Okay, and so with that description, then you have been in, you have had to scout and figure out turkey hunting in new areas a number of times in your life.
That's correct. And it's actually one of my favorite things to do. It's challenging, but it's one of my favorite things to do. It's like finding new spots to fish. I love
Yeah.
that part of it.
Well, can you just run me through the gym card to it and through a checklist of scouting, the scouting process for new turkey hunting ground?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing, the most important thing is to find an area that has turkeys. And you just mentioned that the state of Nevada is not in the top 10 in turkey population. In fact, it's something under development.
Yeah.
So it's a very important, and by the way, most states in the US, excluding Alaska, have turkeys, including Hawaii. They
Oh, yeah.
nearly, I think nearly every state, if not all states in the lower 48, have some population of turkeys. So finding a state and a location that is known to have turkeys is important. And one of the greatest things that you can do, and a lot of people overlook this, is to contact your local biologist. Every state has a game and fish department, if you will. You can go online, find your biologist in your area. And if you call that individual, it's amazing how willing they are to help if you just call. And so, and you say, I'm a new turkey hunter, I'm looking for a place to go. And they'll steer you in the right direction. They're not going to give you a spot and, here you park here, walk up this hill, but they're going to give you a location. That's step one.
Okay.
Find where they're at and find some public ground or private ground. Step two is with today's technology, I strongly recommend that you subscribe to an app like OnX or Basecamp that loads onto your phone and takes advantage of your phone's GPS. And the reason that's important is back in the day when I started back in the 80s and 90s, we had to use topographic maps.
Right.
You had to buy them at the library or you buy them, you have to go to the post office and order them. And today, all of those topographical maps are available online and on satellite imaging. All of that is available on these apps like OnX, which I know you're familiar with,
Yeah,
but there are others. And it's very inexpensive. But when you have that app, you can then use it to identify public and private ground.
Yep.
You can use it to identify where potential feeding and roosting areas are and nesting areas without ever leaving your home.
All right. Well, let's dig into that feeding and roosting areas. Is there an elevation zone that I'm looking for in that?
Well, in the West, it's a great question. Out in the West, where we live, and in Oregon, California, and even Nevada, where you live, elevation does matter. The turkeys winter in the lower elevations, elevation being relative. Here in Oregon, we live near the Willamette River, so a low elevation would be sub 500 feet.
Right.
And higher elevations are in the, I would say 2 to 4,000 feet. But where they winter in the lower elevations, typically near agriculture. So like us, they like to live easy in the winter. They go where the living's good, and that's lower elevation. And they feed on waste crops and any kind of grain or anything they can get their hands on. As the spring snows melt, they start moving higher into elevation. And they do that because there's first of all, roost trees where they like to roost. And then there's nesting cover in those higher elevations on benches, which is very thick, brushy areas where the hens can nest on the ground and be safe. And then there's brooding areas, and brooding areas for turkeys. And again, this is really important in terms of elevation and scouting, are areas where there are, it's not really, really thick and it's not wide open, but there's cover, brushy and grassy cover that's, 12 inches tall or so that the young poults, once they're born, they can feed and so on without getting picked off by raptors.
Yeah, that's one of their primary
That's right.
foes, right? Coyotes and raptors.
That's right, and they'll pick them off. And so, and I've seen it happen. I've seen eagles, try to come down and take out a turkey, a mature turkey. So
that must have been a sight.
yeah, so the elevation, you're looking for areas where you have that combination of terrain. One of the most important things, in terms of feeding areas, turkeys feed on little grass shoots as the snow melts and the new grass shoots start to pop up, grass or other green leaves. They're feeding on that and on insects. And
Right.
so it's very important to find areas that have those new green shoots and insects. And a great place to look are areas where there's recently been burned, because you've got a lot of green shoots coming up. Area where there are cattle. And interesting enough, when there's cattle, the cattle are eating the grass down to where it's fairly short. Turkeys can get at the grass shoots, and also turkey pies, turkey patty, or excuse me, cow patties that are hard. They'll flip them over and eat the bugs and grass shoots that live underneath a dry cow patty. So if you see a field with a bunch of cow patties flipped over, those are turkeys.
All right, interesting.
So you're looking for areas where they're feeding, and they have to have roost trees, which are trees typically larger trees with bigger branches that can support a 20-pound turkey, and branches that are horizontal to the ground.
Yep.
And have room enough for large turkeys to land and sleep and move around on. So those are the kinds of things you're looking for, and you can start finding those areas by using a satellite imaging on Onyx to look at elevation. And you're typically not looking at super steep country. You're looking at areas that have a little more slope to them. Creeks, turkeys need water every day. So creeks or ponds, they like to roost near water. So those are just a few tips to begin working toward finding areas with turkeys. But I would start with, where are they? Can I access the ground, public or private? And getting Onyx or some app to be able to see elevation changes and so on. We can get more into turkey hunting strategy if you want later, but that's the place to start. You got to find them and to be able to and be able to access them.
Okay, that's good. So we got the biologist, we got the digital tool to start researching. What else is on the checklist for
boots on the ground?
Boots on the ground.
There is absolutely you can't 100% turkey scout by using an app in your living room. It's very important that you get out and look at the country. And
that is great news. I'm glad you got to get outside.
As a matter of fact, 99% of what we're talking about is getting off the couch and outside.
All right.
And the time to do that is now. Right now. Yeah. March is the ideal time nearly across the U.S., but particularly where we live in the West, in the middle belt of the country, middle of the northern belt, because that's when the turkeys begin their roosting process. So the winter flocks, they flock in the winter. The winter flocks break up. The hens and toms start migrating into higher elevations on a relative basis to find the areas where they like to roost and nest and feed in the spring. So getting out early in the morning and listening for turkeys gobbling is a great way to start a morning of scouting. Get there early, right before first light, park up high on a hill if you can, and listen, because they start sounding off in a big way, meaning gobbling from the roost in the mornings at daylight in March. That's the best way to find them. And not only can you find them, you can get a gauge for how many there are. You'll also hear hens yelping, and so on. So that's the starting point. Is you got to get out and you got to start listening for birds, and then later in the morning, start walking and looking for sign, tracks, droppings, things of that nature, and perhaps finding areas where they feed and finding their roost trees. Those are all essential elements to set you up for success on opening day.
So, all right. So I got this big tract of national forest. I'm going to go to the smallest town that's still big enough to have a sporting goods store. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to talk to whoever they say is the turkey hunting expert, and then get a general area from that individual, and then go through, and after my conversation with the biologist, then go and dig in on onX and find some public ground that's got roads. Do I want to find roads and creeks, or what's your feeling on that?
So relative to how you use onX is you find areas that have potential for turkeys, and what you're looking for specifically, now that we're getting more specific on onX, is not just 100% straight timber.
Right.
What turkeys want and what you're looking for are mixed woods, where you have a mixture of ponderosa pines, firs, and deciduous trees like oaks, because that mixture is what creates the habitat that they like. Open areas, they like open areas as well for feeding and breeding. And so areas that have meadows or agricultural fields, very important. Once you find that, then finding access points, where to park is important. And when you start scouting, find an area where you can park on what is the highest ground in the area if you can find it. And that's where you want to be first thing in the morning, because you can hear the best from higher elevation.
Gotcha.
And if it's near a creek or areas that have water, that's where turkeys like to roost, is steeper hillsides, not super steep, but steeper hillsides that have appropriate roost trees that are above or adjacent to water sources like creeks and ponds, or where I would start.
Gotcha. And now, I don't think it's an issue here in this part of the Sierra that I'm going to be scouting in, but there in areas where there's wolves, I've heard that the turkeys have gotten less vocal because of the wolf population. Have you seen that in any of your hunting?
I haven't experienced that, but I don't hunt in an area that has wolves, at least yet. But whenever there are predators, especially four-legged predators that can get after them, if turkeys sense that there's a danger, they're going to change their routine. And so I have heard that that is the case in some areas, particularly in Northeast Oregon, where there are wolves. They don't really like coyotes either, although I've seen coyotes and turkeys in the same area. And if there's a flock of turkeys, sometimes they're not too worried about it. But coyotes are really of danger to young poults and turkey hens when they're nesting, but
Right.
typically not when they're feeding and breeding, because they're pretty wary. So they do change their habits, and turkeys are harder to hunt when they're not vocal, as you have learned.
Yeah. I got you. Well, that's good. So I like that, boots on the ground. And then, we're dealing with a lot of snow out here. So I guess I should be finding zones between lowland creek bottoms and kind of where the snow zone starts, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would start looking right at or below the snow line. And because obviously turkeys don't want to have to work that hard to find feed, and when there's snow on the ground that they have to scrape through, that they're burning calories just getting to food, so they're not going to put themselves in that position. Now, as you learned last year when we hunted in Northern California, we were in an area, we found turkeys in an area that didn't have any snow, and then it snowed.
Right.
And then the next morning we got up and found their tracks, and we were able to be successful that way. So it's, you have to be flexible, and you have to deal with the cards that you're dealt. However, I would be looking below the snow zone and follow it up as the season progresses, as it recedes.
Yeah, I got you. So that's good. That kind of agricultural, creeky areas, and then where it moves into mixed woods, and
that's the best. That's
yeah.
the best right there. And if it's on private ground and you have access, that's even better. If it's on public ground and you have access, others have access. So the other element to weave into your strategy is thinking about what other hunters are going to be doing and how does that affect your approach and things of that nature. But that's a good place to start.
All right. Well, that's good. It's a great overview. And for new turkey hunters, you mentioned the Northwest or Wild Turkey Federation.
National Wild Turkey Federation.
Yeah, gotcha. Are there other groups that people can go to get help in their turkey hunting pursuits?
There are. I think another very good place to make connections is through if your state should have a hunters association like the Oregon Hunters Association, where there's a group of like-minded individuals that you can connect with and meet. I've had good luck in meeting people at my local sporting goods store. I've always, just like my fly fishing, I always want to support my local fishing or hunting or outdoor store and connect with folks. So that's another good place to learn. What I would caution folks on is when you go into a sporting goods store and there's a local expert, don't say, "Tell me where to hunt," right?
Right.
Like asking a guy, "Tell me where you shot all those ducks."
All
They're going
right.
to say, in on the river. So that's not the question to ask. The question is more around, how would you recommend I go about finding the turkeys? What type of cover do you hunt?
Right.
What type of strategies do you use? Those types of questions will get you much farther than tell me where to hunt. And if you go there and spend money in their store and they know you're serious and they know you're learning, they're much more apt to be willing to help you. Take you under their wing and maybe even take you out hunting if they
Yeah.
know you're a principled hunter that's just not out to get their spots.
Sure. And even better if you're taking a kid with you for their first turkey hunting experience.
Absolutely. Kids are, first of all, they're super fun to hunt, and most folks want to help a youngster out too. So yes, that's absolutely true.
All right. Well, let's see. Let's talk about a little bit about firearms and how you get your turkey hunting firearm ready to roll so that you're capable when the situation arises for the turkey to be in range.
All right. Well, when we talk about firearms, let's talk about what's the net result we want. The net result we want is we need to shoot a turkey right in the head. You
Right.
don't shoot a turkey in the body
Right.
like you would a pheasant or anything like that, or quail.
Don't want to destroy the meat, right?
Well, even beyond that, yes. And if you shoot a turkey in the body with a 12 gauge, you'll just knock it over. It'll get up and run off.
Uh-huh.
Their wings and feathers are so thick that you can knock them down and they'll run off or fly off. So you need to shoot them in the head to break their head and neck area, and for a good clean kill, so they don't run off. So in order to use a shotgun and have a good clean kill in a spot about that big, depending upon the range, you need a typically a 12 or 20 gauge with a extra full turkey choke.
Right.
Because you want a fairly small pattern to put as many BBs in his noggin as you can. And so I would start with that. Popular today are typically 3-inch mag. I don't think 3.5 inches is necessary for turkeys. I think that just causes people to try to shoot farther out, which I'm not a proponent of.
Right.
Half the fun is getting them in close. So a 12 gauge, 3-inch shell, and so this is an example of a gun that I use, right? This is a turkey hunting style pump shotgun. You can also use an automatic. You can see it's got a Delta Point Pro on it. I added this the last year, and I found that it really helps me stay focused on a single dot and put it on the turkey's head neck area better.
Who makes that Delta Point Pro?
It happens to be a Loophole.
Yeah, nice.
Yes, indeed. And so to me it's more effective than just using the post sights that are on the gun. But either way, having a shot, and the other thing you want to make sure you have turkey hunting, see it's got a sling.
Yeah.
Make sure you add a sling, because you're going to be, if you're doing it correctly, you're going to be walking many miles a day, which is half the fun, chasing them down. So you want a 12 or 20 gauge shotgun, automatic, pumps fine, and something camo if you can, with a sling is a good base setup.
And you want to get that out and kind of march off 25, 35 yards preseason. What's kind of what do you think for a beginning turkey hunter is longest distance that somebody wants to be shooting at a turkey?
Yeah, I mean, even if you're a beginning turkey hunter but an expert shot, you can shoot a turkey out to 45, 50 yards or farther if you have the right setup. I don't necessarily recommend that. I would say, for generally speaking, what I'm looking for, and I've shot 40 or 50 turkeys or more in my life, I'm looking for a shot that's less than 30 yards because I want to get them in close. That's the fun of it, right? That's the challenge, calling them in close. So taking long pot shots at turkeys is not only disrespectful to the turkey, but it also takes a lot of the challenge and the fun away. So I would concentrate on getting really comfortable at 20, 25, and 30. And I would start with, there's a lot of variety in the type of turkey loads that you can shoot, but what you want to shoot is a load that has a high density pattern and with a lot of knockdown power. And so if you're using regular lead, typically 5-shot, 3-inch mag 5-shot lead is the way to go. But there are much more sophisticated and advanced turkey loads today that are made out of tungsten or bismuth that are more dense than lead. So you can use smaller shot size. Like shot sizes today are very popular, are sizes 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah. And
because
even
they have
in those
high
alternate,
knockdown. They have high knockdown, but they're very dense pattern. There's no holes in the pattern, if you will. So for example, this year I'm using what's called a mixed blend 5.67, which I think is an excellent choice. And I got those because they're about $30 a box for 5, as opposed to the straight tungsten TSS loads, which are $63 for 5.
Yeah.
But they have, typically that's a mix of 7 and 9 shot tungsten. So get yourself a good turkey load. But key to your earlier point is get yourself some turkey targets that are paper targets, put them out at 20, 30, 20, 25, and 30, and practice in a seated position, shooting at those ranges and seeing what your pattern looks like. Some guns pattern different with different loads. So you might want to try a couple different manufacturers to get the right load for your gun.
I like that. 20, 25, and 30. Yeah, seated, because it is different than standing.
You're typically not shooting them standing. You're typically seated with your back against a tree or something, or in a blind.
Yeah. All right, I like that. I mean, and we would be remiss to not talk about a box call and how to get a box call tuned in for this. So talk to me about basics on that.
Yeah, for beginners, there's there's what's called a push button call. I didn't have one available, but you can use a push button call. But what I would recommend for most beginners is just a standard box call, which looks like this.
Yeah.
And very easy to operate. The great thing today is there are so many videos on YouTube for how to call turkeys using a box call, how to call turkeys using a slate call. So there's lots of ways to learn that didn't always exist, but starting with a box call and learning the basic, hen yelp, in the different calls that you would use.
Yeah.
I would start with a box. I think every turkey hunter should have one. They're also very loud so that they can be heard from a long distance. So I'd always start with a box call. Another call that's very popular is a slate call, which looks like this. It's got a pot and a striker. And so the sound is a little bit different. You can make some different sounds on here. So if you learn how to use a slate call, it gives you a different tone that could be very attractive to the turkeys. So those are really the two calls that I would recommend beginners use. There are also mouth diaphragm calls, which look like this. They go in your mouth.
Yeah.
They take a little longer to learn how to use. And what you don't want is to throw out too many bad notes to turkeys to make it sound like you're a fake. So until you learn how to use one of these, which is not that hard, I start with a box and a slate and you go from there. The benefit of a mouth call is when it's in your mouth and you're calling, your hands free to operate your firearm and you're not moving around.
Right.
which as you know, and as you've learned, movement is the kiss of death when a turkey's coming in. So those are the key calls for calling the birds in, and locating them. Another important call, the last call that I would just mention, that I think every turkey hunter should have, is a crow call. Just your basic crow call.
Yep.
Because turkeys like to do what's called shock gobble. So if they've been quiet for a period of time, maybe all night, you want to get them to go in the morning, or maybe it's 11 o'clock in the morning, you want to get one to sound off, and you don't want to give away your position with a box call or a slate call, you make the sound of a crow. And oftentimes a turkey will gobble to that just because he's been quiet for a long period of time. He's kind of shocked. He gobbles. So having a crow call, very, very important to have in your kit as well.
Now, when I'm out there scouting, is it ethical to use a call to try to locate birds and go through that early process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's as ethical as it is using a duck call to call ducks in. It's part of it, and it's a big one of the, I think, things that is most enjoyable about turkey hunting, similar to elk hunting, is you are actually calling to them. You're communicating with the bird, and you're enticing that bird to come in to your position. And it's not easy. It really isn't, because in nature, the toms gobble and the hens go to them. So the hens are going to the male bird, which is the tom or the gobbler. What we're trying to do is sound like a hen and get the gobbler to come to us. So it's different, right?
Yeah.
That in itself is part of the challenge. So you really got to sound sexy. You really got to sound convincing to get that bird to come into you. But in terms of is it ethical? It absolutely is. What things that aren't ethical turkey hunting is walking underneath them and shooting them out of the tree.
Oh, yeah.
Not cool. Not ethical. Setting up next to somebody's barn feeder and blasting them off the back deck, when they're, getting some grain from a feeder in the guy's backyard. Those are not, ethical ways to shoot turkeys, in my opinion. But hunting in a blind, or, pursuing turkeys on foot, calling to them, absolutely the way to go, and very ethical.
Nice. Gotcha. What about preseason? Are you able to call out preseason?
Well, you're able to.
I mean, is
you
that
can.
legal and ethical?
It's legal.
Yeah.
Now, is it ethical? It's ethical in as much as it's not illegal, and you're not harvesting the bird, right? It is, I would say, something that you want to do very sparingly, because the more you call, the more you're educating the birds. The more you're educating the birds, the harder they are to call in. So it wouldn't be ethical to go on someone else's private ground and do a bunch of calling for practice and educate their birds that you have no intention to hunt. I think that would be unethical. I use calls very sparingly in the preseason, and typically just a crow call, or perhaps early in the morning or late in the evening when the birds are on the roost, hit them with a box call one time to get them to gobble, and then that's it. You just don't want to overdo it and educate the birds, bottom line.
Gotcha. All right. Well, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, the one thing we didn't cover is when opening day comes, or when the morning opportunity comes for you to hunt the birds, and you want to hunt them in the morning if you can, because they're in the roost trees. And so ideally you would have gone out to your hunting area the night before, right at dusk. The turkeys fly up right at last light, a little bit past twilight. They fly up into trees because they're safe in trees at night. And at that time, if you can hit a crow call or a box call once and get them to gobble, where they're at.
Right.
It's called roosting birds. It's finding them in the roost. As soon as you hear them gobble once or twice, just leave. They're there. There's no need to harass them after that. The next morning, once you've roosted or bedded birds and you know where they're at, the next morning the idea is to park your truck and on foot, get as close to those turkeys as you reasonably can, probably within 100 yards or so, so that first thing in the morning, when you start hearing them wake up, you hear light yelps from the hens, etc. You can make a couple of hen yelps and let them know that you're there. And you haven't, that's when you're engaging them for the first time and have that opportunity to call them in. So it's that last piece of this, how do you actually get out and hunt them? That's what you would do at daylight. Now, you've noticed that they don't always fly right toward you from the roost, because if they're roosting with 5 or 6 hens, as sexy as you may sound, Emanuel, they're going to stay with those 5 or 6 hens.
As would I.
As would most of us would. So then your strategy is to stay with them until they've bred those hens and are looking for someone new. And that's where you want to show up.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, this has been good. And I have gotten a lot of good stuff as far as how to start to track down property and areas and what to look for in my desk scouting, but then to get out and walk around.
Yeah, there's no substitute for that. A couple quick final thoughts is I strongly recommend even beginner turkey hunters get a turkey vest that has a place to put all your things. I have one here. This one is one from Cabela's, but it's got a nice big pad. So that you can sit on that. It also has a large area where when you shoot a turkey, 4 miles from the truck, it helps you carry that turkey back safely. And then just lastly, speaking of safety, one of the most important things to think about in the spring turkey woods is safety is paramount. It's extremely important that you verify your target before ever pulling the trigger. And when you're hunting public ground and you're calling and sounding like a hen, or there's a turkey gobbling, chances are there's another hunter in the area that may be closing the distance at the same time. So you want to be very, very careful and very cautious to always know your target before you pull the trigger and verify not only that it's a turkey, but that verifies that it's a legal turkey, which is a turkey with a beard.
Right.
Visible beard is a legal turkey in the spring.
In the spring, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good conversation. I appreciate your time and the amalgamation of all that experience wrapped up into 36 minutes. So thank you very much, Jim.
Looking forward to getting out and pursuing them with you this spring.
Yeah, me too. I'm ready to get some boots on the ground.
You bet.
And so this is thanks for being a guest on the Nature Bound podcast. And I want to encourage everybody to check out the 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, which is a guideline of how I spend the time outside at least 1 week every month to get off the computer, away from technology, and experience nature.
Amen.
So, I appreciate it, Jim. I look forward to seeing you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nature Bound. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's episode, please share with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to purchase your copy of the 7 Principles of the Magic Rock at EmanuelRose.com or on Amazon. We thank you again for joining us today, and remember to get nature bound.